How did the U.S. pull off one of the most daring rescue operations in history, deep behind enemy lines? It all comes down to one firm code the U.S. military lives by: leave no man behind. They will literally send dozens of attack helicopters and over 100 special forces and Delta operators just to bring one person home. The mission began when an aircraft went down. After both crew members ejected, the pilot was successfully pulled out, but the weapons systems officer was injured and stranded. His survival training instantly took over. He trekked all the way up to a rugged mountainous ridge and triggered his beacon just as IRGC militias began closing in on the crash site. The CIA was one step ahead. They launched a massive deception operation, a ruse designed to send the IRGC hunting in entirely the wrong location. When enemy forces finally figured out they had been fooled, all hell broke loose. They flooded the mountainous ridge surrounding the injured officer. Just in time, special forces swept in on Little Bird helicopters, laying down heavy covering fire alongside A-10 Thunderbolts and MQ-9 Reaper drones, proving the military is willing to destroy a $100 million aircraft just to bring home a single fallen comrade. This is stage one. When the jet went down, both crew members ejected. The pilot was covered within hours, but the weapons systems officer wasn't so lucky. Ground. Despite his injuries, he hiked over 2 miles and climbed a 7,000-foot ridgeline. While avoiding capture, he managed to activate his emergency beacon, allowing U.S. forces to start tracking his position. But he couldn't stay on the radio continuously. His transmissions had to be kept short and infrequent. Then comes stage 2, the CIA's deception game. To give the downed officer more time, the CIA launched a large-scale disinformation campaign inside Iran. They began spreading rumors that U.S. forces had already located the WSO and were trying to move him out on the ground. It worked exactly as planned. This phantom ground exfiltration successfully pulled Iranian military resources and attention completely away from the real extraction site. That brings us to stage 3, the tip of the spear. It is 2 o'clock hours. The skies over southern Isfahan and Kogaluya, our Delta Force and Navy SEAL Team 6, are launching a massive heliborne assault. They arrive in MH-6 Little Bird helicopters, fully loaded with miniguns and missiles, built for speed and tight mountain corridors. Miles above the pitch-black mountains, dozens of U.S. military aircraft, including HC-130J Combat Kings and EA-18G Growlers, spread an invisible net across the region. They unleashed a powerful wave of electronic warfare designed to completely blind Iranian early warning radars, while an MQ-9 Reaper drone kept a steady, unblinking watch on the wounded WSO. The U.S. literally built a temporary forward operating base inside Iran, an abandoned agricultural airstrip just 200 feet wide and 3,900 feet long, located around 14 miles north of Shiraz City in the southern Isfahan province. Here comes stage 5, against the odds U.S. Special. Just as they got ready to grab him and go, the horizons started filling up. IRGC ground forces, popular mobilization units, and local militias were rapidly converging on their exact position. Hours-long firefight broke out right in the open. Look at this ridge. They were completely surrounded, taking fire from every direction. U.S. operators laid down a punishing wall of suppressive fire, guns up, air cover above, ready to destroy any IRGC element that came within range. But it was the U.S. aircraft orbiting overhead that truly turned things around. To keep the extraction corridor from falling apart, assets like the A-10 Thunderbolt rained fire down on them. The sheer volume of close air support from the A-10's Little Birds and Blackhawks pounded the surrounding Iranian positions, causing serious losses and reported casualties. Across areas like Kuhai and Kakan, that air support gave the ground teams the one thing they needed most: seconds. Under the cover of that intense air support, the Special Forces helicopters finally got the wounded WSO loaded onto an extraction aircraft. Just when it seemed like they were going to make it, according to the Pentagon, 2 of the transport aircraft assigned to the evacuation developed critical problems and could not get airborne. Suddenly, it was a race against time. The IRGC was rushing toward the airstrip in a large convoy. The remains of a U.S. MH-6 Little Bird helicopter were also spotted next to what was left of HC-130J Combat King to rescue. near the Iran-Iraq border. This terrain is made up of jagged peaks and deep, narrow valleys. It is a tactical nightmare for pilots, but provides excellent cover to stay hidden from long-range radar. It also gives enemy forces the perfect conditions to set up devastating short-range anti-aircraft ambushes. But how did the U.S. lose an F-15E Strike Eagle, an A-10 Warthog, nearly a combat search and rescue helicopter, and a Reaper drone, all in one night? Here is how it started. At 2:15 hours, a flight of two F-15E Strike Eagles crosses the border at low altitude. A pilot and a weapons system officer were tasked with striking a deeply buried command bunker. They used terrain-following radar to stay hidden in the valleys, flying beneath the reach of... But what happens at the moment they have to strike? To drop its GBU-28 bunker? Buster, the lead Strike Eagle, has to climb and rise above the mountains. This breaks the radar horizon. It gets a lock, and two missiles leave the rails. The crew ejects into the pitch-black mountains, and the Sandy Protocol is immediately triggered. But this is the U.S. military, and they will move heaven and earth to bring back a fallen combat crew. At 2:45 hours, because the crash site is close to the border, A-10 Thunderbolt II is operating nearby, are diverted for rescue escort. Down below, Iranian quick reaction forces are closing in on the downed airmen. The A-10 executes a low-level strafing run with its legendary 30mm Avenger cannon, neutralizing the convoy. But how did this aggressive move come at a price? The noise and tracers reveal its position as the A-10 banks hard, bleeding off airspeed. For context, Iran recently pushed large quantities of Chinese shoulder-fired missiles onto the battlefield. Weapons that are essentially reverse-engineered copies of Russian manpads. An Iranian soldier fires an MSAD-2 infrared-guided missile. At that altitude, countermeasures deploy too late. The missile tears apart the right turbofan engine. But can the Warthog's legendary armor save it? Yes. The armor kept the pilot alive as the aircraft kept flying even with a badly damaged engine. Because of that protection, the pilot managed to steer the dying jet toward a plateau and eject. But just how many crash sites are we dealing with? The F-15E came down deep inside southwestern Iran specifically. Local reports and confirmed wreckage photos place the crash site in the rugged mountainous terrain of Kogaluya and Boyaramad province. The A-10 Warthog did not go down over the Iranian mainland. After taking serious damage during the search and rescue escort mission, the pilot managed to guide the crippled jet away from the mountains and towards safer airspace. The heavily damaged A-10 eventually went down in the southern waters of the Persian Gulf, specifically near the Strait of Hormuz. At 3:15 hours, a dedicated combat search and rescue package launches. These are highly specialized rescue units built specifically for this kind of mission. It includes an HC-130J Combat King serving as an airborne command center, followed by two HH-60D helicopters with call signs Pedro 11 and Pedro 12. They fly low under the radar, topping off their fuel midair to maximize time on station. But will they make it into hostile territory without being spotted? They push deep into the Zagros Mountains, just as dawn begins to appear, for 45 hours. Pedro 11 picks up the A-10 pilot's infrared strobe. Pedro 12 circles above, providing overwatch with its .50 caliber machine guns. Pedro 11 flares for landing, and the parascumen hit the ground to lock down the pilot. Then it happens. A hidden Iranian Zu-23, a Soviet-era anti-aircraft gun, opens up from a concealed position. It is an ambush. Heavy armor-piercing rounds tear through Pedro 12 as it orbits, cutting transmission lines and wounding the crew. The pilot forces the crippled helicopter into a hard-controlled crash near Pedro 11. The rescue mission has now turned into a fight for survival, and Pedro 11 is the only way out. Under heavy covering fire, the crew of the downed helicopter runs to the surviving aircraft. But how did they stop the enemy fire? At 5:20 hours, the HC-130J overhead coordinates an immediate strike. Two F-35 stealth fighters orbiting high above in stealth overwatch drop precision munitions, silencing the anti-aircraft gun. With the A-10 pilot, the parascumen, and the downed helicopter's crew all packed inside, Pedro 11 is at its maximum weight limit. But how do you fly an overloaded helicopter out of the Zagros Mountains? Here is how they pulled it off. Pulling maximum power engines at full scream, they barely clear the tree line and drop back into the valleys, racing hard for the border. By 5:30 in the morning, Pedro 11 crosses back into Iraqi airspace. Battered, overloaded, but alive. As stated, no one gets left behind. The F-15E crew is still listed as missing in action, requiring a massive JSOC raid the following night. An F-35 was also hit during one of its combat sorties. To properly understand this incident, you need to know that there are two completely different types of missiles, radar-guided and heat-seeking. The F-35 was designed to be nearly invisible to long-range radar, but it was not built to fully hide from heat-seeking missiles. So how exactly did an Iranian missile manage to get past the F-35's stealth technology? The answer comes down to one key weakness: its heat signature. Its shape and radar-absorbing materials make its radar cross-section extremely small, essentially making it invisible to standard early warning and targeting radars. To put it in perspective, this is how a plane's radar signature compares to a bird's. But the F-35 runs on a single Pratt & Whitney F-135 engine, one of the most powerful fighter engines ever made. The F-35 is built to defeat radio frequency radar like the billion-dollar S-400 and S-300 missile systems. However, stealth does not mean completely undetectable. This engine produces a massive heat trail. Rather than radar, modern air defense networks now rely on infrared search and track systems. The solution is a short-range heat-seeking missile, exactly like this one. These passive sensors scan the skies for any unusual heat source. Because infrared search and track systems give off no energy of their own, the F-35's radar warning receivers would not alert the pilot to being tracked, not the way a radar lock would. But how did the missile get a lock, and how did the F-35 attempt to evade? Once an infrared-guided missile is in the air, the fight becomes a race of physics and countermeasures. As the missile's IR seeker head locks on to the massive heat output of the F-35's engine exhaust. For detection, the F-35 carries a distributed aperture system. 6 infrared cameras positioned all around the aircraft, providing a full 360 spherical view. The distributed aperture system picks up the intense heat of the incoming missile's rocket motor and instantly warns the pilot. To break the lock, the pilot pulls high-G evasive maneuvers while simultaneously releasing flares. If the missile chases the flares but is already within lethal range, its proximity fuse triggers the warhead. The shrapnel and shockwave that follow can cause serious damage to the aircraft's control surfaces, stealth coating, or internal systems, without landing a direct killing hit. This lines up exactly with reports of the F-35 sustaining damage, but safely completing an emergency landing. What are flares? These pyrotechnic countermeasures are made of magnesium or other combustible metals that burn at temperatures higher than the aircraft's own engine. The aim of flares is to overwhelm or confuse the missile's IR seeker, forcing it to go after the decoy heat source rather than the jet. But what is Iran's secret weapon? We believe it is the 358 anti-aircraft missile. It's also known as the SA-67. The 358 is a unique hybrid between a loitering, munition, or kamikaze drone and a surface-to-air missile. But how does it work? It travels at slower subsonic speeds and can loiter over a set area in a figure-8 pattern till its optical and infrared sensors detect a target. If a 358 missile, or a more advanced high-speed IRG-guided surface-to-air missile was directed by a ground-based IRS network, it could engage the F-35 entirely within the infrared spectrum, completely bypassing the jet's radar, aiding or evading capabilities. This event challenges the long-held belief that fifth-generation fighters can fly in contested airspace with total freedom, highlighting the growing danger of infrared detection. Though it does carry one limitation, it cannot engage fighter jets operating well outside its launch radius.